Louie T, welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander in chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, I was waiting on this media scrum session from Adam Peters, and I couldn't find it anywhere. It wasn't on the team website, it wasn't on the YouTube channel, and I just kept waiting patiently. We saw clips from some of the beat reporters that were in Orlando at the league meetings, and anybody that's anybody from all 32 teams are at the league meetings right now in Orlando. They take the coach's photo at these league meetings, they take the general manager photos, and so everybody has to be there. Owners are there, the committees get together, they're voting on rule changes, proposals are being made. So much is going on, right? Every year we get this meeting. The coaches have their breakfast. You hear from the coaches. You get a little scrum session. Last year they had this same little scrum for Martin Mayhew and those guys. So this is not new, right? A lot of people try to act like, oh, we weren't getting these before. We were getting these before. They just didn't care then. They care more now. But I was trying to find this thing, and I just thought, well, maybe I just need to be patient. It'll show up. Nothing. And then finally, shout out to my guy, Joe Rockhead, who sent me the link to the video. So JP Finley apparently had it on his YouTube channel. I guess it was a bit of an exclusive there. They were all sitting at a little table, looked like in a side conference room or something. And it was just the beat reporters and Adam Peters sitting at a table and kind of rapid fire, firing away, hitting him with questions. And he was really gracious with his time. It was roughly a 16-minute interview. And I sat there and I ate it up. It's Chef P. Come on, man. The dude is cooking up some crack here, man. So, anything he bottles up right now, anything he puts on the grill, flips it over. I'm a vegan, and even if he slaps a big ass piece of steak on, I might cut a little sliver for myself and indulge. I mean, that's what he's doing right now, right? Everything's all good. So I watched this thing twice, and I took notes. There's some things that I may leave out of here that you may deem important that I really didn't. I wrote down all the things that kind of stood out to me and answers that I deemed important, not interesting. Okay. So I'll go in the order of which this information was disseminated and he answered these questions. And so he talked about the progress being made. It was one of the first things that he responded to. A lot has been done. With the addition and the signing of Michael Dieter, we're now up to 18 outside the building free agents. And then, of course, Washington has re-signed 3 of their own, okay? And Cornelius Lucas, Jamison Crowder, and F.A. Obata. But now the number is up to 18 with the addition of Michael Dieter. So it's 21 total free agents, 18 outside the building. And so, yes, a lot has been done. But a lot of what he said, we've been talking about on this channel, right? So we were kind of ahead of the game a bit because I told you guys before free agency took off and got underway, it was going to be fast and furious. And we were going to be very active and expect a lot of signings, a lot of low-level signings. And in response to that, Adam Peters said, we have done a lot in a short amount of time. And in his mind, what he's referring to and what he said, and first of all, let me just say this. Adam Peters is so diplomatic. I love the way he approaches every answer. It's, very measured. He is very thoughtful with everything that he says, but he makes sure he doesn't say anything that could lead to speculation or kind of put them in a position where they have to answer more questions about something that they maybe didn't want out to the masses. He's very deliberate, calculated with every single word that he speaks. So you're not going to get much out of him that he doesn't want out there. Okay. So with that said, um, when he talks about getting a lot done in a short amount of time, he's talking about being competitive. You know, this is a team that won 4 games last year, and in most of those 13 defeats, wasn't very competitive, especially towards the end of the season. But there were some big time ass whoopings even early in the season, as early as Buffalo. So there were a lot of non-competitive games a season ago, and changes needed to be made. Roster has been turned over, and they have done a lot in a short amount of time. When you think about the front office, bringing in the likes of Lance Newmark, and you look at the coaching staff, Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Witt Jr., so forth and so forth, and you look at the turnover on this roster, a lot has transpired, and it's amazing to look at where we are now compared to where we were a month and a half ago when we were just, finding out about the hire of Adam Peters. Think about where we were 2 months ago this time when we were listening to our owner talk about a process and putting together an advisory committee and not knowing what the future would hold. And now, a full 2 months later, we've revamped the front office, revamped the staff, and turned over the entire roster for the most part. Going into the draft in a very comfortable state in terms of not needing to chase needs per se. I still think there are a couple of positions that kind of stick out like a sore thumb, but they've alleviated a lot of the needs that we went into. Remember, when this process first started, what were we saying? Hey, quarterback at 2, and then at 36, you take an edge rusher or a tackle, and at 40, whatever you don't take at 36, you take at 40. So whether it was tackle, edge rusher, or edge rusher, tackle, those needed to be the next 2 picks that were made. Because that was out of necessity. Didn't have an edge rusher, didn't have a tackle. You fast forward 2 months now, or really 2 weeks, we got defensive ends, right? You may not love them, but they're good enough to get the job done, at least to get us through to next year, right? Tackle, I still think that's the priority after quarterback in the draft. I don't think that's changed. We'll get to one of his answers. I think it's an interesting answer. I don't think it's one that he's being diplomatic again, and I love that about Adam Peters. But to say that he's done a lot and they've done a lot in a short amount of time is an understatement. That is a understatement in itself. Is an understatement. He talked about the Sam trade. This is the first time we've heard from Adam Peters since the Sam Howell trade to Seattle. And, anytime they talk about a guy being tough, when the first adjective to describe a player is he's tough, that's all you need to know. If you're really talented, if you're really good, I can come up with a bunch of adjectives before I get to you're tough. That's a throw-in. And he's tough as nails. That's usually how that goes, right? The first thing that Dan Quinn said out of his mouth when he was asked about Sam Howell the very first time was he's tough. That's a dead giveaway. That's like saying someone's baby, oh my God, that's a cute outfit. Translation, I want to say something nice. Your baby's not cute. I'm sorry. Right? Oh my God, look at her earrings. Okay. So when he said, first of all, Sam's a tough kid, I was like, okay. All right, I get it. You didn't think that highly of him and you wanted to move him. I get it. He said, look, I talked to Sam, I talked to his people, kind of let them know the direction we were heading in. And he's got a really good agent. I'm friends with his agent, so I think that made the process that much smoother. Like Seattle was excited to get their hands on Sam. We were excited about the compensation we received, and I'm excited, and Sam and his agent are excited about the opportunity they're getting in Seattle. So it's a win-win-win for everybody involved. Again, got no ill will towards anybody in this process. What happened needed to be done. I think we needed a clean break because allowing Sam to stay here would have kept that port. Same thing we said about Taylor Heineke last year, right? There's this ridiculous rabid portion of the fan base that just couldn't let go. And if you kept Taylor Heineke here, you weren't going to give the next guy, which was Sam, an opportunity because those fans would constantly be calling for Sam's head, looking for Heineke to get an opportunity, and it wasn't going to be a conducive environment nor situation. That first game against Buffalo where Sam struggled, the Heineke hive would have been there chanting for Taylor Heineke to get in the game. I'm not saying that same thing would have happened had Sam Howell remained here, but trust me, there were going to be some that felt like he should be the starter. They're making a mistake, and at the first decision, whether it's to not start the rookie or he struggles early, whatever the case may be, it would have been the same thing. So Sam's getting a fresh start in an environment that is going to be really good for him should he get an opportunity. We got good draft capital in return, and Seattle's happy with a young quarterback that they may be able to build around. So it's a win for everyone, and that's pretty much what he said. This next thing, this is a word I've never heard before. So he was, Chef P was asked about the 1-year deals and the steady diet. And I told you guys, and I said a lot of what he responded to, we've talked about for months. I prepped you on a lot of this stuff. And I told you, I said, it's going to be a steady diet of 1-year deals. There are going to be some 2 years mixed in there, a few 3-year deals. But for the most part, a lot of 1-year deals because what you're trying to do is get your team through this season, hoping that you find 4 guys in the draft that are core players that you add to the guys that were already here that were core players. And you're hoping in free agency, you grab 3 or 4 more guys that are core players that you add to the draft guys that are core players that you add to the guys that were already here that were core players. And so in year 1, you walk away and there's 22 guys that you feel really good about moving forward, right? And then, 10 of those 1-year deals come off the books. You reset it, you do it again, and it's going to look like this again next year, right? There may be a few more 2-3-year deals in the mix, but it's going to look a lot like this again because you're going to be turning that roster over again. You're going to be getting some more guys in here. Some of those guys like De'Ami Brown that were here, not going to be here next year, right? So it's going to be a lot of that same stuff going on, right, next year. They'll have a better working knowledge of this roster, however. The guys that are here, what they're capable of, do they fit, what are their work habits, all that stuff will be a little bit different next year. But he talked about the 1-year deals, and he used the phrase at least 5 or 6 times, optionality. And optionality essentially means we've got options. We've got flexibility. When you sign a guy to a 1-year deal, you're essentially saying you're a rental. We need help. We need to fill out the roster. We don't see you as a long-term fix, right? We don't see you as a player that moving forward is going to be a part of the solution. But for the meantime, in the short term, you're going to help us get to where we ultimately want to go. So it's mutually beneficial for us and you because you're looking for work. A 1-year deal kind of fits what you're looking for. We need you as a rental. A 1-year deal is what we're looking to invest because after this season, in order to do this again, we need to be healthy from a cap standpoint. Also, what these 1-year deals do is it puts you in a position, as I mentioned before to you, and we'll get to that here in a second, it gives you the ability to go into the draft not needing situations and positions and players, but wanting that player or position or that situation to unfold a certain way so that you can try to take advantage. And there's a big difference, as I mentioned at the top of this show, between wants and needs. We went into this process needing a defensive end, needing a tackle in the second round, and there was really no equivocations. Now you don't need a defensive end. You still need a tackle, but you don't need a defensive end. So now BPA starts to come up, and we'll talk more about that because he did answer that and talk about that a little bit later on in this scrum. He talked about Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. And unlike when he described Sam, the first thing out of his mouth was, those guys are incredible, right? Because that's the adjective you use to describe a player that you think is really good, right? Not he's tough. That's basic. Anybody can be tough, okay? So, he talked about Frankie Louvu, and it's all the things that we've talked about with Frankie Louvu. And I said, if anybody's watched Frankie Louvu, then you know. Those who know about Frankie Louvu. And he said, look, I wasn't even really privy to, Frankie Louvu until, sitting down and really, digging in. But I'd watched him from afar and saw how hard he played, but really digging in and having a chance to sit down. I mean, it's an excellent guy, and he's a player that just you see the passion on the field. I don't really need to explain anything else. If you've watched cut-ups, I've watched him play. I've been a fan admiring his work for the last 2 seasons in particular in Carolina, and felt like, man, that's a guy I'd love to see in a Washington uniform. I just never thought Carolina would be foolish enough to let him walk, right? I would have made it way worth his while to stay in Carolina. There's no way Frankie Louvu would have been leaving if I were the Carolina Panthers, but that's nor here nor there. He also talked about Bobby Wagner, and he just talked about the game last year Washington played against Seattle in particular. And he said, we started there with our evaluation. And he said Sam actually had a really good game against Seattle, which I talked about with you guys, which is part of the reason Seattle, wanted him so badly. That was the last good game he played last season. It was week 10 at Seattle. For me, that game had solidified that Sam was the guy, right? Like, he went in there, tough environment, on the road, did it again in late game situation, gave us a chance, and then the defense, as they always do, pissed it away. And I just figured, whatever happens for the remainder of the season, Sam's already proven to me that he's the guy, right? He's a dog. I had no idea it was going to go off the rails the way that it did, but he talked about how well Sam played in that game, and that's part of the reason Seattle, wanted him. But he also said we watched that game and saw Bobby Wagner playing, and we saw the range was still there, the intelligence off the charts, his ability to still make plays. He's like, this guy is still playing at a Pro Bowl level. Like, there's no drop-off really, in what he's still providing. So unlike when we signed Thomas Davis here 4 years ago, when Ronald Rivera came in here and signed a veteran linebacker with some chops, who had nothing left to give from a football perspective, Bobby Wagner is still playing at a very high level. Again, he was a Pro Bowler last season, and he led the league in tackles. So, again, there's still some good football left with Bobby Wagner, and we're hoping to see that in the upcoming 2024 season. And then he also talked about his leadership skills, the work ethic, and all of the things that he can instill on some of the players on the team, but specifically in that linebacker room, which takes us to the next question and answer from Adam Peters. And it was about Jamin Davis and the fifth-year option, and, how do you view Jamin Davis? And he talked about, first things first, fifth-year option. We haven't even discussed that. And that seems to be a go-to line of his when he doesn't want to answer something. And he may be telling the truth. I find it highly unlikely. He did this same thing when he first got here, when he talked about the quarterback position. We haven't even talked about it. Yes, you have. But that's fine. I don't mind him saying that. That's an easy way, and if I were in his shoes, I'd do the same thing. It's an easy way to get people to stop asking you. A question is, we haven't even discussed that, so, we don't even know what we're going to do yet, right? They're not picking up the fifth-year option on Jamin Davis. I will be shocked if they pick up the fifth-year option on Jamin Davis. They're not tying themselves to any X amount of millions of dollars with Jamin Davis, um, when they can probably go out in the market or even in the draft and find a guy that's going to be way cheaper than. And Jamin Davis is an athlete. He does have a unique set of skills, but it ain't that damn good to pick up the 5th year option. I can't envision a situation in which they pick up the 5th year option. It's this. It sounds real Cam Curlish to me. Like, yeah, we haven't really discussed that a bunch. We'll get to it. No, he's not getting his 5th year option picked up. But he did say that Jamin Davis is a really good football player, and they're going to play 3 linebackers on the field. And he said Dan Quinn is one of the best in the league, which he is, at putting together personnel packages where you're able to find different, groups on the field, which is something that we never saw with Jack Del Rio, which was one of my biggest complaints over the 4 years, is that you can't get Khaleke Hudson on the field in any capacity. There's not a package you can put together to get Khaleke Hudson to allow him to shine. I'm not telling you to play Khaleke Hudson 35 snaps a game. You can't get him on the field for 12 snaps, for 7 snaps in a package that allows him to do the things that he does best, be around the line of scrimmage and get after the quarterback and look to make tackles for loss on the opposite side. There's not a package you can put together for that. Clearly there wasn't. With Dan Quinn, there will be packages that he'll put together with all of the different guys. We got 97 safeties. We got 3 different backers that we feel good about. You're going to mix and match these parts and put guys on the field in different packages that are going to give different looks. They're going to give us a chance to, really create some difficult matchups for the offense, right? And that's what you're hoping to do. And he talked about Jamin Davis being able to do that. So I expect him to be a solid contributor this year, but I don't expect him to pick up the 5th year option. But we'll see, right? I could be wrong on that. Adam Peters talked about the importance of pro days, and I talked about that. It's crazy that came up because I talked about that just yesterday, about the importance of pro days. And, it's really your first chance as a general manager to see a lot of these guys live and in color, right? In person. And I talked about that. A lot of these guys don't perform at the combine. And even then, you're not at field level at the combine. When they're on the field, they're in press boxes. You can get close if you want, but a lot of these teams don't. At the pro day, you're on the field. You're at field level. You get to see this guy. And he talked about, having not seen a lot of these guys in person. He's like, we saw them at the combine. They had on sweats, so you really can't see their body type, and you know, on tape, you don't really get to see the ball come out of their hands and the velocity, or a guy striking a bag, or a target, or a guy coming out of a break or whatever. You don't get to see those things in person on tape. You can't quantify that stuff on tape. You can when you're in person, right? So the pro days are important. They really are, because I think it's a more accurate assessment of cross-referencing some of the things you may have or haven't seen, right? Does he really have a live arm? Now you're going to find out. You're in person. You're going to see it come out of his hand. You're going to see him spin it. He talked about touch and things of that nature. You may see a little bit of it on tape. You may not have seen enough of it. So maybe there's some throws that they put together in their script that show off a little bit of touch, and that's something that you needed to see. But another thing he says that you gather at pro days is you get to talk to all of these coaches. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was when our brass was at the Notre Dame pro day, they pulled aside the Notre Dame offensive coordinator, who was at LSU last year, now at Notre Dame, and they had a nice little conversation with him for probably about 15 minutes, kind of grilling him about Jaden Daniels, right? Kind of getting as much intel as they could. I don't know if you guys saw the pictures of that, but they're out there, and you take in that information, and he's like, you get a lot of that stuff, and you don't really realize how much of it you've gotten until you kind of sit down and you kind of spread out all the information that you've gotten after that week is done, and you go, "What, man? We got a lot of good stuff." And so that's where they're at. They're in the information taking process now. They're taking in as much information as they can on these prospects, especially at the top of the draft. You can't do enough. There's no such thing as enough homework on a quarterback that you're about to spend a top 2 pick in the draft on. There's no such thing as too much homework, too much due diligence. You can't do enough to try to vet this player because it's such an important decision that you're about to make. This could make or break, Adam Peters' tenure here in Washington. Not that he'll be fired if this doesn't work, but it could go sideways quickly. There's a lot of trust that the fans have put in Adam Peters. Blindly, most of us have. You don't hit on this quarterback, a lot of that trust probably goes away for some. And it's going to be hard to get it back, right? So, again, this is a big decision. This is a big decision. And you got to try to get it right. There's no science to this. There's no art, that's going to ensure you get this right. But you want to do as much as you can to try to put yourself in the best position possible to do all of the things to minimize, missing a red flag, right? You want to make sure that you give yourself the best chance to get this thing right, so that you don't have to do this again, so that you don't end up with the number 2 pick in the draft again, so that you aren't 4-13 again, and we're not having this conversation 4 years down the road again. This was really interesting here. So he talked about the quarterback position, and he talked about Marcus Mariota, and he talked about Jake Fromm, and he talked about that they've already got 2 quarterbacks. And he said you want to go to camp with 4, which we always knew was the number because you want a camp arm, and then you may have 3 guys that, and in our case, I told you already, we're going to have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Okay. We're not a good enough roster yet, and we don't have an established enough roster to only keep 2 quarterbacks. When your roster is trash, you keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster. And with the new rule of having an emergency quarterback, I think most teams may try to keep 3 if they can. But again, if you got a really good roster, you got a championship caliber roster, it's hard to keep a 3rd quarterback because you have tough decisions to make at other positions, and you just don't have the space to carry an additional quarterback. If you're the Chiefs, you got Mahomes, you get him a veteran backup, and you call it a day. You don't have time to develop a young quarterback and have a 3rd roster spot taken when you're a championship caliber team. If you're the Buffalo Bills, you got Josh Allen, you go out and they went and got Mitchell Trubisky, and that's it. They don't have another roster spot for a young quarterback on that roster. They got too many other things that they have to try to fulfill on that roster. Whereas Washington, we got nothing but space and opportunity on this roster. So it's almost mandatory that you keep a 3rd quarterback here. I just don't want him to be Jake Fromm, but don't know if that's going to be an option or not. But he said, look, we got 2 quarterbacks, Marcus Mariota and Jake Fromm. And he said, we're going to add 2 more. At some point in this process, whether it be the draft, free agency, and the draft, trade, whatever, he didn't say all of those things, but he's saying we're going to add 2 more quarterbacks. I told you guys already, I think they're going to draft 2 quarterbacks. Now, it could easily be a quarterback at 2 and then an undrafted guy that they get after the draft is over and make him a priority free agent, right? So either way, they're coming away with 2 quarterbacks. I think, via the draft. Whether it's an undrafted guy and number 2 overall, or they draft number 2 overall and then spend another one in the 7th round or in the 5th round. But the likelihood is they're coming away with 2 quarterbacks via the draft, I think. So he talked about that. That was interesting. He also said he wouldn't call tackle a hole. Okay. This is diplomatic Adam Peters we're talking about here, right? This is the diplomatic side of him. He wouldn't call tackle a hole, right? Cited Cole Luke and Trent Scott as two guys to look at. And he even went as far as to say, I was like, okay, you're going a little too far here. He said he would be comfortable with those guys starting. Cole Luke, yeah, I would be too. Trenton Scott, nah, come on now, stop it. He's supposed to say that though, because what that says to everybody else is we don't need a tackle. We want a tackle, but we don't have to draft one. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. But that's the way to handle it, right? Is to say, no, we're good at tackle. We've done enough at tackle to where we feel really good about the guys that we have on the roster. And if the opportunity doesn't present itself, we won't go reaching for a tackle. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. 36 or 40. I'll bet any amount of money. 36 and or 40, tackle. Okay? One of those two picks is going to be a tackle. I wouldn't be shocked, and I don't rule this out, that both of those picks are tackles. Highly unlikely, though. Highly unlikely. One of those picks is a tackle. My money is on 36, but again, the beauty of 36 and 40 being so close together is that you don't have to take a tackle at 36 if you feel good about 3 tackles, 2 tackles. The likelihood that they'll all be gone by the time you get to 40, slim and none, right? So if you like 2 or 3 tackles at 36, you can say, but they're not the best player available. Tight end is the best player available at 36. Take the tight end, right? 4 picks later, you can double back and get the tackle, right? But that's the beauty of the situation that they've put themselves in. We'll talk about that here in a second. But to sit here with a straight face, as Adam Peters did, this is why I love him, and give us that little cheeky smile, right? And say, yeah, no, we don't need, that's not a hole. Yeah, yes, it is. It's definitely a hole. But to even go as far to sell it by saying, oh, no, we feel good about them starting. Interesting. I love it. I don't believe a word of it, but I love it. Again, I'm comfortable with Cole Luke. If you told me we drafted a tackle at 36, he's starting at right tackle, Cole Luke is starting at left tackle, or vice versa. We drafted a left tackle, Cole Luke starting at right tackle. I'm cool with that. And Trenton Scott's your swing tackle. I'm cool with that. What I wouldn't be cool with, and they're not cool with, is Trenton Scott starting at right tackle, Cole Luke starting at left tackle. They're not cool with that. You aren't cool with that. Nobody's cool with that. Neither is he. But I appreciate him making sure that he keeps that lie alive, right? Keeps that narrative going. That, oh, we're good at tackle. Keep that poker face. He talked about not having to rush a rookie quarterback because they have Marcus Mariota on the roster now. For some of you, that's some scary, scary shit, okay? I've heard so much Marcus Mariota bashing over the last month, and I am just, not month, he hasn't been here that long. Over the last 2 weeks, I am baffled at why Marcus Mariota has been just downgraded to the scum of the backup quarterback earth. I am shocked. There was so much praise for Jacoby Brissett last year. And look, you may, if we're rating backup quarterbacks and you love Jacoby Brissett, knock yourself out. I'm not that I love Marcus Mariota, but backup's a backup, Some are better than others, but they're all backups for a reason. Mariota was the number 2 overall pick for a reason. He's talented. As Adam Peters said, he's won a playoff game. Marcus Mariota can play football. It's the shit that you get, and I've said this already, and I've talked about this, so I don't really need to beat this horse because I've done it already. But I've said when it comes to Marcus Mariota, I just want him in concentrated form. The more you dilute Marcus Mariota, the longer you have to play him, then the worse the product gets. But if you keep Marcus Mariota in concentrated form for 2 quarters, for a game, for just 2 games, he'll be fine. You can survive with Marcus Mariota. Another thing that I find interesting is he said that you don't have to start a rookie quarterback because you have Mariota. And you know, when it comes to the quarterback position, it's a delicate balance. And I'm listening to other coaches talk about this, and I think it's all preference based. Your experiences, what you've seen, what has worked, where you've come from. Like I listened to Antonio Pierce talk about a young quarterback and starting him right away. And he was like, I was in New York with Eli Manning when he was a rookie, and they didn't start him right away. He didn't play. Now, again, we're talking about almost 2 decades ago. Eli was in the 2004 NFL draft. We're going to the 2024 NFL draft. So I get it, right? I think Eli was in the '05 draft, I think. '04 was Ben Roethlisberger and all of those guys. Um, I think Eli was the next year because Antonio Pierce was still in Washington in '04. He left in free agency in '05, and I think that was Eli's first year in '05, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, um, he talked about Eli not starting until like week 8 of that rookie season. And he's like, he wasn't the unquestioned starter until his second year in the league. Again, we're talking about almost 2 decades ago. It's a totally different NFL now. However, all that means is it's a million ways to skin a cat. There's so many different ways to go about this. And Adam Peters is essentially saying, look, how ready that quarterback comes in and is able to prepare himself is probably going to be the determining factor as to whether he starts or not. If a guy comes in and right away he shows you the command of the offense, the ability to get everybody lined up, to set protections, or at least to be aware of what's going on around him, you feel comfortable putting him out there, then you will, right? If there are things that you're not sure he's capable of doing at that very moment, and it is detrimental to the team, but also it is of the utmost importance to his development, and he's just not ready yet, then you don't put him out there, right? And that might not happen for 4 to 6 to 8 weeks. And so it just all depends, right? It just all depends on how that quarterback comes in and is able to take to the system. So we'll see. But he did talk about Mariota and said, we don't have to rush anything. We got Marcus Mariota. I know some of you guys, if you were taking a sip of something, you might have spit it out when you heard that. Doesn't move me one bit. I don't think Marcus Mariota is your week 1 starter, but if he is, all that means is the guy that they drafted, they don't think he's ready to go yet. And I would rather them not put him out there if he's not ready. I know what you're going to say. Well, if he's not ready to go, what does that say about him? Maybe it doesn't say anything. Maybe it just says they don't want to rush, putting their number 2 overall pick out there. But if you look around the NFL, guys that are drafted in the first round, specifically in the top 10, generally start week 1. But again, that's not always the case, but it usually is the way that it goes. But, we'll see. He talked about DQ creating a QB ecosystem. And I love the way he referred to that as a QB ecosystem, because I had talked about creating an ecosystem around the quarterback, right? Whomever you draft, creating an ecosystem. I use that exact same phrase, but I was more so talking about, the skill players and the offensive line and the defense being good, and so that the quarterback didn't come in and feel like he had to do too much. Unlike last year where we essentially put everything on the shoulders of Sam Howell. The defense was trash, so you had to go out there and outscore the opponent every week. The offensive coordinator, etc. said, you know what I'm getting at. It was too much on a young quarterback who had made 1 career start going into the season last year. You don't want to do that. to your young quarterback this year, right? You want to have a run game. You want to have an offensive line that can protect him. You want to have a defense that can keep the score relatively low or at least manageable so that that quarterback doesn't have to sling it 47 times, right? That's what I was referring to as an ecosystem. Get him skilled players. As a wise man said a couple weeks ago that I really hold it in high regard now, and this is a statement that you've probably heard me use multiple times because I believe in it, is you got to provide your young quarterback with the 3 Ps, right? And that's playmakers, protection, and play calling. And that's a part of that ecosystem that I was talking about. Well, Adam Peters talked about a QB ecosystem that Dan Quinn has put together, and he was essentially talking about all of the ex quarterbacks in the building that are coaches for the Commanders now that can help with that young quarterback's development. And obviously, it starts with Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, but then it goes to Brian Johnson, who will be the pass game coordinator. David Blau and Tavita Pritchard are also former quarterbacks as well. They're in the building. Tavita Pritchard, you're going to be your QB's coach, and David Blau is in the building as well. So you've got all these different former quarterbacks, guys that can kind of help mold a young quarterback, and that's a really good situation for this young guy to be thrusted into, essentially. He talked about moves made in free agency to create a BPA environment for the draft. And I've been talking about that for the better part of a week and a half. And with every move, I got more excited. Not necessarily because the moves were all that great. There were some that got us really excited. Obviously, there were some that I was really adamant about, and then they go out and they do it. The ones in particular, obviously, Frankie Louie was at the top of my list. I strongly advocated for Jeremy Chin and Michael Davis. And then I also felt like Bobby Wagner would be a great addition. I didn't think he would come here, though. And then he did. So, you're super excited about those. Solid signings with guys like Tyler Biadasz and Dorrance Armstrong, who got 3-year deals. And, something that Peter said at the top of the Scrum was a lot of the free agents that they signed, a lot of guys that they brought in, they wanted to be comfortable with them. Like the best guys to bring in are guys that you're very familiar with. You know their work habits. You know their passion for the game and what they're capable of. And do they fit the culture and what we're trying to bring here? And so it's much easier when you know a guy. And so a lot of what they did in free agency, including a guy like Marcus Mariota, where I told you, don't overthink this. Marcus Mariota is here because of his connection to Brian Johnson. And literally, Adam Peters said Marcus Mariota is here because of, Brian Johnson and that connection and Johnson putting in a word for him. And so sometimes it's as simple as, who do you know? Who do you know? And that's, again, I always talk about sports being a microcosm of life. And a lot of times it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's no different here, right? But he talked about the free agent signings and those kind of alleviating that burden of needing that position. And I talked about that. And that's all I really talked about with free agency for the most part was we got to keep adding players. Adam Peters talked about creating competition. And I think a guy like Michael Dieter creates competition for Ricky Stromberg, right? Who I talked about yesterday saying, where does this leave Ricky Stromberg? Well, what it does is it creates competition. If Stromberg is as good as advertised, as a former, SEC center that played at a high level that the last regime thought was worthy of a 3rd-round pick, if he's as advertised, then he should be able to beat out Michael Dieter, a fellow 3rd-round pick from the 2019 draft, however. But he should beat out Michael Dieter, who is proven himself to be nothing more than a backup interior offensive lineman at this point of his career. Beat him out. Go take that backup center job. Go take that backup guard job or wherever. Beat him out. But in doing the things that they've done, signing 4 defensive ends, signing 2 linebackers, signing a safety, 2 safeties if you count Jeremy Reeves back, signing 3 corners, one of which is of importance in Michael Davis. The other two, they could easily not be on the roster. I think Noah Igbenogany is going to be here. James Pierre, there's no guarantees that he's here, right? But in doing those things, you put yourself in a position to where you don't have to have anything, right? We went in saying, hey, we need linebacker, we need defensive end, we need tackle, we need corner, we need tight end, and the list was long of things we had to have. We need these. Well, you go out, you sign 4 edge rushers, you sign 2 linebackers, 3 if you count Anthony Pittman. You sign 3 corners, you sign 2 safeties, you sign a tight end, and all of a sudden you look up and a running back, not the speedy kind that we were all looking for, but a guy that can find the end zone and has a track record that precedes him. And you look up and you go, well, damn, all of a sudden all of those needs that we said we had aren't as dire anymore. Now they're wants. This is what allows you to go BPA. And he essentially said as much by going out, creating that competition, but also adding players onto this roster at positions that we knew we needed to fill. Look, we got to field a team, right? Which is what he talked about with those 1-year deals, which is what I was telling you guys. You got to field a team, right? And you're not going to fix everything in one off season. But it allows you to go into the draft and say, best player available, here we come. That is the ultimate goal. As I've said many times in this process, you want to be at a position right now where you're adding players that allow you to be at your best come late April from the 25th through the 27th. You want to be at your best in that 3 day, because as Peter said, and he said it again in this presser, but he said it in multiple interviews, and I've talked about this, and this is what I've been saying for years, and this is what you hear from any GM, and they'll tell you. You build your team through the draft, you supplement your roster through free agency. And it may seem like it's vice versa right now because of how many holes we had and how they're turning over the roster, but understand, they're not building this team through free agency. You don't build your team with 1-year deals, okay? It'd be a little bit different if we were handing out a steady diet of 3 and 4-year deals. Now you're trying to build your roster through free agency. We handed out a steady diet of 1-year, 2-year, and the occasional 3-year deals. We didn't hand out any 4 or 5-year deals to anyone. The most we handed out were 3-year deals. Okay? But it was mostly 1-year deals. It puts you in a position to continue to build through the draft, and it gives you optionality. He talked about optionality, and that optionality continues to keep you flexible from a cap standpoint, from a roster standpoint, and a draft standpoint. You've got options because you didn't tie yourself into a guy with a long-term deal for a bad contract. You got options. If Jeremy Chinn proves to be a great fit, guess what we have? We have optionality, which means we have the option to bring him back next year on a 3-year deal instead of a 1-year deal. If he sucks this year, guess what? You have the option to let him walk. And you don't have to eat any of the costs because there's nothing tying you to Jeremy Chinn because you signed him to a 1-year deal. That's what optionality is, and that's what they've done. That's what they've created here by going out and doing what they did in free agency, creating a BPA environment for the draft. He talked about recency bias and not having it. I really believe that recency bias phrase that he used when he was talking, I think that comment was aimed at the J.J. McCarthy noise that has been conjured up by the media, because they took him out to dinner the night before his pro day. They were at the pro day. They haven't been at anybody else's pro day yet, of the big quarterbacks other than, Caleb Williams, but he's going one overall to the Bears. So it's easy to connect the dots to J.J. McCarthy because they haven't been to the LSU or the North Carolina pro day yet. So the most recent thing is J.J. McCarthy. So yeah, all the signs point to. So I felt like that was a veiled shot. That was a sub, right? That was a subliminal. That was a sub right there. It was a nice, smooth, easy sub. Like, okay, I see what you did there. And then finally, he closed the scrum with Jonathan Allen comments. So we remember going all the way back to the end of the season, and I told fans, don't overreact. If Jonathan Allen doesn't want to be here, then he doesn't have to be here, right? But you can't talk to somebody right after the season ends. There's a lot of emotions, frustration. You get sick of losing. We saw him blow up multiple times last year, and that whole locker room was disjointed. And I think he was, along with some of the other veterans like Logan Thomas, who continued to speak out, and even Cornelius, or not Cornelius, but Charles Leonard Jr. to a lesser degree. But you saw a lot of those veterans starting the frustration and the tension starting to boil over. And as we got to the end of that season, Jonathan Allen was fed up, and changes needed to be made. And if the changes weren't to his liking, he might have requested a trade. That's not who he is, though, right? He just wants structure, and he wants a chance to win. And that's what these guys are going to provide here. And I told you, I said, this is all that needs to happen to make Jonathan Allen sing a different tune because of his background and, his nature. He was brought up in a military family, so he's mentality-wise, he's a soldier. He's a good soldier. And he just needs order. He needs direction. That's why I love playing for Nick Saban, because he ran, his teams with military-like precision. And so there was never, ever a situation where they weren't prepared and they didn't know what they had to do. And it's never been that way in Washington. We've never been overly prepared. And I said all they have to do when they, get everybody, specifically the GM, like once they hire the GM, whomever it is, all that guy has to do is go to Jonathan Allen and kind of give him a framework of what it is they see the vision of this situation turning into, right? And one of the things that Adam Peters said, and I've been tongue in cheek with this, I've been having some fun with it, is they won't call it a rebuild. And he said, Jonathan Allen, the person that asked the question was like, Jonathan Allen said he didn't want to be a part of another rebuild. And Adam Peters was like, well, this isn't a rebuild. This is a recalibration, right? So that's been their thing. They're recalibrating, okay? I've joked and said, call it whatever you want. This is a rebuild. But they want to call it recalibration. Your words, not mine. That's been another one of those things that they've done. Dan Quinn said, your words, not mine, right? We're not rebuilding anything here. We're finding our north, right? We're recalibrating, finding our north. So Adam Peters is sticking with the recalibration. All right, so that's another buzzword if you want to throw it in the pile of buzzwords. Optionality, another buzzword if you want to throw that in there. We've got a plethora of those buzzwords, but he said of Jonathan Allen, he's a good football player. He's a great football player, and we're not interested in trading him, And so you need those types of players. If you're going to build this thing the way you want to get it, you need guys like Jonathan Allen. Now, will they be singing that same tune next year? A year older, one more year left on the deal. Could he become a piece that they look to move? Possibly. But right now, they're trying to create a culture. There isn't a guy that I would want more if I'm trying to create a culture, a winning culture of guys who understand, like, this is what it needs to be. I know we haven't done a lot of winning here, but Jonathan Allen did a lot of winning in high school and in college. And he isn't a guy that is okay with losing. And sometimes you get players who become jaded and content with the way things are going. As long as I'm getting a check, I'm good. That'll never be Jonathan Allen. And that's the kind of mentality they're trying to instill in that building is we can't be okay with losing. We can't be okay with being content. Jonathan Allen is one of those guys that gets that, and he's going to hammer that home. And you want players like that in your locker room. So I never thought he was getting traded as long as the GM went in and made it a priority early on, which they did, clearly, with Jonathan Allen, and talked to him and let him know this is the direction that we're going in. We're not rebuilding anything here. We're recalibrating. We're going to turn this thing around, and we think you're a part of that. That's it. That's all that needed to be said, and he's going to be on board. Unfortunately, when Ronald Rivera came here, he could have done the exact same thing with Trent Williams. He didn't. Hence, Trent wanted out, right? He could have salvaged some relationships here that he chose to just poo-poo, like, whatever. You don't want to be here, we'll get rid of you. And so they took a vastly different approach. Adam Peters did in particular when it came to Jonathan Allen. And so he's not going anywhere, essentially is what he said. So I thought it was a well-done scrum. And got a lot from this one. And as we continue to kind of, this is important for me. I can't speak for anybody else out there. These interviews, every single interview that is done is important for me as I continue to try to build a profile as to what to expect from Adam Peters. You know, and how he speaks, you know, the things that he says. Like, this was the first time that I think he looked me in my eyes and he blatantly lied to me. And I was okay with that lie. Because I knew it was a lie as soon as it came out of his mouth. But it was in the spirit of making sure that everybody out there knows we don't need anything. Yes, we do. But you can't say that. We do need tackles. Plural. Tackles, S. But if you just get one, which we will, you're fine. He can't tell anybody that we need tackles. He can't tell anybody that we need a quarterback at 2. He can't tell anybody that we need a boundary corner or that we could use an athletically gifted tight end or that we could use XYZ, a big receiver, or just a dog at receiver. He can't tell anybody any of that stuff. He shouldn't. That's nobody's business but everybody in that building. But we know this is what we do, right? We follow this team as close as one can humanly possibly follow a team. We do that. So we know. Ain't no damn way. He thinks Andrew Wiley's a starter. Didn't even mention his name when he talked about the tackles on the team. He didn't mention Andrew Wiley. I've had a lot of people over the last couple of days say, you keep dismissing the thought of Andrew Wiley starting because they not stupid. This group is not dumb. And I've been saying this. They're rational thinkers. This is why I can align myself with them and kind of put myself in their shoes and feel like I know what they're going to do because they're not stupid. You can't fix stupid, as a wise man once told me. Can't fix stupid. They're not stupid. They know, okay? They know Andrew Wiley can't play tackle at this level. Not consistently. In a pinch, if you got to, sure. they're not knowingly going to go into the season with Andrew Wiley as their starting right tackle. Not after what they watched last year. So I feel pretty confident that worst case scenario, you draft a guy and Cole Luke probably is starting opposite of that rookie. That's now if that rookie's not ready to go or something crazy happens, I really don't want to see what a starting tackle situation of Cornelius Lucas and Trenton Scott looks like. please don't do that to us. But you're literally one injury away from that taking place, which is why I say you need to add, like he said, you need to add two quarterbacks. You need to add two tackles. But we'll see what happens. It wasn't a great, tackle market, so I don't blame them for being, really cautious with what they did and ultimately coming back and just re-signing Cornelius Lucas. There wasn't anything really out there. So we'll see what happens. But that, in a nutshell, is Adam Peters and his scrum. And it was scrumdiddlyumptious. It's Chef P. What else did you expect, right? Anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing what Dan Quinn has to say today. He will be interviewed. We heard from all the AFC coaches yesterday. We get the NFC coaches today. As soon as that audio or the visual is out to the masses and disseminated out to the masses, I'll be reacting to it. So expect another video at some point today. I think those videos will be a lot easier to access, being that it'll be first thing in the morning, and also it's going to be more public. It's going to be more in a public setting. You could tell they got Adam Peters off to the side in a room, sat down, got a camera, got the lighting, got everything. Like they made this a really clean, like the one at the combine, literally they went behind a podium, threw up a couple lights and a camera and literally just go for it. It almost felt like they were in the locker room. This one was much more orchestrated. This was planned. Hey, we're going to go in this room. Y'all go ahead and set your lights up. If you got recorders, do your thing. We're going to get us a little room, a table, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to shoot this. Quinn is going to literally be sitting at a table at breakfast, and everybody's going to shove their cameras and microphones and things of that nature in his face, and he's going to be rapid fire questions, and he's going to answer them, and hopefully we don't get it in bits and pieces, but we probably will. Either way, we'll be reacting to that tomorrow. So, in any event, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Till next time, you guys have a good one. Take care.
LouieTeeNetwork.